Or at least
All
that's
right.
We're live.
Once more, I think.
Second time's the
Yes.
charm.
Are we here? Can you see us?
I can
this beginning. All right, we are. Okay, we had a little bit of technical difficulties. Somehow we got interrupted in our broadcast, but we're back. So for anyone who missed, we'll do a brief intro again. My guest is Rachael Maddox. She is a trauma resolution educator, coach, and guide, which means that Rachael has chosen to dedicate her life and her work to working with women and men who have trauma of some sort. In the aftermath of the metoo movement, when we were all kind of feeling shaken and stirred up by what we read, what was shared, the personal implications for us, Rachael and I decided that it would be a wonderful idea to come here and talk to you guys all about her experiences as a trauma resolution educator, my experiences as a writing group facilitator, and then to talk about how we can move forward to writing and creating through these stories in a really safe and sustainable way. So once more, Rachael, I'll ask you to introduce yourself since we got interrupted last time.
Sure. It's my pleasure to be with you, Jeanette. I'm hearing a feedback. I'm hearing an echo.
Are you?
I can deal with it.
I can sound issues.
All right. Yeah.
If you're live with us now and you hear an echo or feedback, let us know and we will try to address that too. This might just be the day for technical difficulties.
And if not, I'll just, it's gone. Okay, perfect. Yay. This happened last time too. Cool. So I'm Rachael Maddox. I'm a trauma resolution educator, coach, and guide. I work with women and men to help them unshame and reclaim their sexuality, their sensuality, their sensitivity, their emotionality, their power, their feelings of choice and safety in the world. I've written the book Secret Bad Girl, which is a sexual trauma memoir and resolution guide. And I'm working on my second book called Sex After Trauma, which I'm super freaking excited for. I do workshops, retreats, online classes, one-on-one work, all the things. So groups. So I'm super glad to be here. Just always love jamming with Jeanette. We have such a good time together.
Yes, and as you said, this is probably our 12th interview together, from courses to creations to collaborations. So we've done this a lot, and I think really with the work I do in the world, so I work and lead writing groups and creating groups with mostly women, which means that trauma is a part of what I see in my daily work as well. But it's not my level of expertise. So whenever this topic comes up or whenever we need to dive a little deeper, it's always Rachael that I turn to because I want somebody who is well-versed in the techniques and the background and the science. I think it's really important to bring in experts on a topic, especially one as important and sensitive as this. So I'm always so grateful to have you in my network and in my circle, and so that I can offer your wisdom to people who want to write and create through these stories. So the inspiration for us doing this call today was the metoo movement and what happened. And as I said, our first time on this, I think at least for me, it took me by surprise. There was the slow build in the news stories and the things trickling out. And then I remember scrolling and I saw the first person share the little metoo blurb. And I thought, oh, this is really interesting and powerful. I'm going to do this. I'm going to share it. Having no idea what was to come in the next couple of weeks. And how it would impact me personally, how it would impact the women who were writing with me, how it would impact friends and loved ones and family members, and really the amount of triggering and grief and trauma that rose from it, the amount of healing and power as well. So I would love to hear from you, since your work, you're a woman in this world, which means you have a personal and intimate relationship with this. And this is also your work and your service to the world. So I would love to hear what you saw and experienced and felt throughout that time.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said in there about how it took you by surprise and how it started small. And then all of a sudden there was like this huge outpouring that you weren't expecting. I think that can be really indicative of trauma. We can, think we're just going to write a poem about that time when we experienced that thing. And all of a sudden, writing that poem opens a can of emergency worms that we didn't know was even in there. And it's like hard to put the lid back on. So when I was watching this movement happen, well, first of all, I was in a 3-day immersive trauma resolution retreat that I was hosting for 12 women. And we'd been doing this invocation like multiple times a day, that our healing was for the sake of the healing of the whole. Like it was this whole like spell we had cast. And then we get out of the retreat and the Me Too movement's happening. We were like, holy moly, holy mother of God. But yeah, you know, you start thinking like, okay, I have the capacity for this. But then what you don't realize is you've blown something kind of open, and the things that pour out, we don't always have the capacity for. And I see this a lot with people who come to work on their trauma resolution. They're like, cool, how many sessions is this going to take? You know, like, get it done kind of thing. Like, can we be done in a month? Can we be done in like 2 months? Like, how long does it take to heal trauma? And I'm like, well, it's really not like that, because it's really about this dance of expanding our capacity to be with intensity and riding waves of intensity to completion, as opposed to just getting knocked out by them. So what I saw happening with the Me Too movement was not just a wave, but a tsunami of intensity hitting the collective field. And who has capacity for a tsunami when they've never even really swam in waves? Not very many people. So I think it was very overwhelming for people's individual nervous systems, for our collective nervous system. And when we're overwhelmed, we check out, right? We either spiral in emergency, spiral in a feeling of fight or flight, hypersensitivity, anxiety. A lot of people I know weren't sleeping. I even me, who works in this field, who knows how to self-regulate, who knows how to like soothe and distract myself in healthy ways when there's a lot of intensity, which is how we cope. Even for me, it was really overwhelming. I mean, I got 30 emails or messages from people in deep emergency states. And for me, that's way more than I'm used to. Mm-hmm. So I think it was a very overwhelming experience for a lot of people. And we either loop in hyperactivity, fight, flight, freeze, hypersensitivity, or we collapse into hypoactivity, which is like depression, lethargy, checking out, numbing out. Mm-hmm. So that's what I saw happening, which isn't to say that it wasn't a positive movement all in all. I think that whenever we bring the dark into the light, it's a positive thing. But there's a difference. John O'Donohue talks about this in his book, Annam Karam. He talks about how healing doesn't want to happen under a neon light. It wants candlelight. And to me, the Me Too movement was like neon. Right. But I believe as well that trauma resolution really does best in candlelight.
So I guess then that's the question, right? Of how do we go from that intensity and the necessity, I suppose, collectively of bringing all of that into the neon lights so that everyone can look at it and see it. And for me, I think even knowing how many stories I've held in my life and the experiences that I've had and leading the groups, it was a massive impact to see how I don't think there was a woman in my social media sphere who didn't share, and just the grief of that. Yeah, like the huge grief of that. And then we move forward into this space where now it's back down. So that's both welcome and necessary. And also I think maybe leaving some people feeling a little abandoned in the midst. So they got to that, like you said, they're riding this wave, and then all of a sudden they're on the beach and nobody's around. Right. and what happens then when everything's gone quiet now? And so it's gone back on the ground, and many people, yes, have taken that to the candlelight and they're finding their healing from it. But I think a lot about the people who aren't. Yeah. Who've just been left with this massive collective story and personal story.
That is so great. And first of all, I want to also just say, there's zero shame in being part of that neon light, you know, like you said, it kind of takes you by surprise. There's these really great intentions, I think, of telling your story, of sharing, of being part of the movement. I think it's a well-intentioned desire for healing. So I want to just make that very, very clear that when I talk about about how it seems like it was a little bit of a tsunami of intensity or a neon light, that's not intended to create a feeling of shame for you if you've shared, like, you didn't do anything wrong. Like, congratulations, just like deep honor, deep reverence for you. And then, yeah, to speak to what you're saying, it's like going from that neon light to utter darkness. Wait a second, everything was super exposed, and now what's holding me? So I think the question then becomes, okay, something got unearthed for you. What's your impulse? What's your curiosity? What's your instinct? What's your intuition say about what to do next? And it might be telling you, you know, I think that was a little too much. I don't want to go back to that for a while. That's fine. It might be telling you, gosh, writing that story opened a can of worms, and I have so many stories or so many poems to write. I want to write them all. Great. Jeanette has a class. We made a class about how to write safely through grief and trauma. It might be this weird, like, nagging desire to do cartwheels or to dance. Your body might be saying, wake me up, wake me up. Great. So it's really important to listen, to feel into what are you insatiably curious about, or keep getting intuitive hunches about, because that's your inherent healing plan that everybody has within them. There is no like right step to take next. It's really about listening and honoring what your impulses, what your intuition, and what your curiosity are pointing you toward.
Absolutely. And so what I also think about people, so there's some people out there who already had delved into writing this story or sharing this story in some kind of way, whether totally privately, friend to friend, or in a public matter, or they're writing, they have a blog, they've been public. And then there's other people who had never even considered speaking this, who did for the first time, or who sat with it for the first time. And maybe they didn't share it on Facebook, but maybe you sat down with a friend or your mother or something, and for the first time actually had the courage to say out loud, this happened, this is part of my story. So for both groups, you know, one, people who have been writing or creating through this and who want to continue, and then for people who really hadn't begun but now feel like there's more of this story that needs to be told. I want to be a part of this movement. I want to bring this into the light. How do you guide people through that process of feeling safe with creating or sharing? I know we talk about that a lot in the program that we created, how to decide what stays private, what gets shared, how to prepare yourself for that process of feedback.
Well, this isn't exactly answering your question, but have you heard of the poem Eat Rice, Have Faith in Women by Fran Winnett?
No.
She was this like lesbian poet in the 60s or 70s. And this poem, Eat Rice, Have Faith in Women, there's this one line that's like, I must believe, it's about teachers. And you know what, let me look it up real quick. But it's about like, I must believe that you'll come back and find me. Just the last few lines of this, because this poem is just really standing out to me with what you're saying. Oh, that's not it. Hold on.
And while Rachel's looking, I want you to know we've got some people watching. So if you have questions, if you have thoughts on any of this, if you have things you've been wondering about, please pop them in the comments. I can see them all as they come in. And we would love to make this an actual response to what you're needing as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so this is the part of the poem. This is just the first few lines, but it also ends this way. Eat rice, have faith in women. What I don't know now, I can still learn. If I am alone now, I will be with them later. If I am weak now, I can become strong. Slowly, slowly. If I learn, I can teach others. If others learn first, I must believe they will come back and teach me. Eat rice, have faith in women. What I don't know now, I can still learn. Slowly, slowly. If I learn, I can teach others. If others learn first, I must believe they will come back and teach me. I love that so much. And you know, one of the things we were talking about before hi, Toe, I love you too. One of the things that we were talking about before we got on the call was just this idea of making a choice, right? When these deluges of intensity come and hit us, whether it's from sexual violence stuff to racial stuff to national emergencies or health emergencies, gun violence, whatever it is, we have to really check, am I the one at the epicenter of the emergency? Mm-hmm. If so, cool. Like, let ourselves be the one experiencing the emergency. So for you, if you were like, you know what, this is my time, I'm ready to share and I'm ready to be supported. Awesome. Share, be supported. If you're someone who's shared a whole bunch, you might want to ask yourself, you might want to have this picture of clarity. We've been here long enough times to know that when these movements happen on the internet, they can feel like an emergency to everyone's collective nervous system. So you want to ask yourself, am I the epicenter of this story, or can I support it? Can I create a safer container for the person who needs to share their story, for the person who needs to be heard? And so for me, as someone who's written a book about sexual trauma, who's told my story plenty, you know, I wrote my own little Me Too story, and then I realized not one human on earth needs me to add to the forest fire. What they need is for me to be a really stable ground. And that's where I stood as someone who, you know, holds this role of trauma resolution educator, coach, guide, whatever. So it's good to make an empowered choice, make a conscious choice to just pause, right? Like you said, these things happen really quickly. So anything you get that quickening feeling about, pause and just see if you can step back for a moment and ask, like, what's the momentum of this movement about to be? Can I tell? And what's the role that would feel most, what's my instinctual, you know, sense about the role I ought to play, or my role in this whole story? And how, if possible, can I choose what feels doable, healthy, within my means, so that I'm not, one, creating more emergency, like creating emergency for myself, but two, adding to a forest fire if it's not really my fire. And again, none of this is intended to shame sharing. I think part of what's really important is acknowledging when it's your turn. Like, it's my turn to tell my story. I've got to do this. That's amazing. That takes so much courage. And also acknowledging when you can play a different role so the whole system can be healthier.
And for so many women, this was really the first opportunity they had to speak into it. Because there's people, you know, who have delved into the writing and the sharing, and they've been in women's circles, and there's been safe places. And for some people, this was the first time they felt that door open.
Yeah.
Like, now there is a place I can actually speak this.
Yes.
I would love to hear, because, you know, Rachel and I can talk about how this impacted us and what we felt from all of us, but you out there who are listening, I would love to hear what you experienced in your body and with your story through this, and then what you're feeling now a couple of weeks out from it.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you want to pop that up. Jessica commented, that would be great if people were like that. And I'm not sure at what point that came in, if you were reading the poem, but Jessica, if you want to clarify that or speak to that a little bit, we would be happy to do that too.
Yeah. I think that came in through the poem. Well, while we're waiting too, you know, one of the things you had asked me in that multiple threaded question was around, you know, how do we safely prepare to write our stories? And this is something we go more into in the course. But one of the things that's sort of core about trauma is the feeling of choicelessness, which is why I'm really putting an emphasis on pausing and making a choice. It's not to kind of shame the speed that happens with emergency, but it's to remind you that it's a possibility that you could slow down and make a choice that would feel healthy or feel safe or feel supportive. So one of the choices I really encourage people to make is around setting themselves up for safety when they are writing. So if you've got this thing that wants to pour through you, to just maybe take a paper, like, because I know how fast these things can happen. You can be like, I must share this. Like, it's an immediate need of mine. So to just take a pause before you dive all the way in and say, cool, what's one thing I can do before I write this poem, for example, that would feel safe and supportive? What's one thing I can do during? And what's one thing I can do after? And some examples of like before might be like to say a prayer. May this come through me in a way that helps heal me instead of hurts me. Great. Some simple intention that like you want to be left feeling better, not worse. During might help you to have a glass of water, or to be playing really like your favorite music, or to light an incense. These things sound small, but when you're in that momentum of emergency, you can forget to create conditions that feel comforting and safe. And then 3, afterward, I want to leave my computer. I want to call a good friend. I want to ask for just like loving mirroring. And then I want to go to take a bath and go to bed early. Like, what are the conditions of self-care that you can set yourself up for so that your writing doesn't create emergency, but actually cultivates healing?
Right. And I think that that's a myth I would like to counter, I guess. I don't know if myth is the right word, but that writing about destabilizing experiences doesn't have to be destabilizing in itself. It can actually be a supportive, safe, and sustainable practice that moves you through your healing instead of back into your trauma. And that's really the root of what we try to do in the course and what all of these conversations are about. How does telling that story not become a re-traumatizing event, but instead take you to a different place?
Yeah, no, and I think that is so important, because if you go into writing, okay, I have personal experience with this. In like 2014, I believe, I wrote a poem a day. I did like a poem a day project for myself. It was a private experience. I didn't publish them, but I had a private secret blog, wrote a poem a day. And this was sort of the height of me living under the trauma spell, like I like to call it. And I had a ton of really dark poems. I had zero context for how to deal with trauma. I didn't realize that writing these poems was kind of like spiraling me into a depressive state or a manic state. Like I would get super angry and then I'd get super exhausted and depressed. I had no idea. And I remember my old mentor, Jen, saying like, Rach, can you please stop writing the goddamn poems? Like, this is not helping you. And it wasn't, because I wasn't doing it in a way that was supportive. Things that are supportive is like little doable pieces. Like, don't do it every freaking day. Like that's like going to trauma therapy every day. No, your nervous system doesn't have the capacity for that, probably, So, doing little doable steps, coming back to a state of like health in your body, or healthier state in your body before you go back in. These little things really make a big difference. And it's the difference between that was a re-traumatizing experience and that was a healing experience.
And I think a lot of that comes to learning, like really being in touch with your body enough to know, and we talk about this in the course too, of how to identify these triggers kind of before you're in the state of emergency. So you can actually respond before you get to that place. Is really being in this practice and state of embodiment with writing, because we think of writing as happening up here, right? And it actually really doesn't. Writing, creating, it happens. It's a whole body thing. And so if your whole body is involved in the writing and your whole body is involved in the trauma and the memories of the trauma, it's like a really intense dance.
Yeah, and I just want to say too that like no matter how great you are at noticing what's happening in your body, at self-regulating, at self-care, you're still going to get triggered sometimes. Like I have done massive amounts of trauma resolution work, and I do this work as a professional. And I was recording my audiobook for Secret Bad Girl just last week. And I got to the point, where I'm telling my story and I kept messing up on like the dialogue. And I was like, I don't know why I'm messing up here. What could that be about? And it was like specifically in a very intense, like rape scene essentially. And I called my friend who was like the sound engineer, and I was like, hey, can you help listen to this dialogue and tell me if it sounds okay or whatever? And he comes upstairs and I was like, actually, can I have a hug? And then I just started to cry. And I didn't even like I couldn't have told you before I hugged him and before I started to cry that I needed to cry. Like I had already kind of gone into an automatic dissociative state without realizing it. So knowing that that kind of thing is going to happen and having the support on call, like that's why I had one of my best friends as the sound engineer, so that I knew if I was struggling, he would hug me or hold me or whatever, and I wouldn't be all of a sudden accidentally looping in an emergency state for a week, which can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no shame if that doesn't happen. It can feel really hard to get the support you need. So if you're in this spot and you heard that story, you're like, well, damn, I don't have a friend who would hold me. I have a lot of empathy for you. And I know what it's like to be in that spot too. I've been there. And sometimes when you're in that spot, that's when it's really appropriate to go to a trauma sensitive yoga class or find any kind of therapist, whether they're trauma informed or not, just like find someone who you can be like, or, call your most uncomplicated friend and say like, is there any way, I know this is a super vulnerable ask for me, but is there any way like maybe you could cook me dinner and then hold me? I'm going through a lot. I can't really talk about it. Maybe we can just watch TV together, but like, I need the feeling of someone else's body next to mine who's safe.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then if you're in a space where there isn't someone in person, someone who can come to you, and this is why, I run my groups the way I run them, is to create that very safe space online, at least, to find a collective you write into. You don't have to write into the void. You don't have to just write into the dark of your own truth. You can write, share it into a space that has proven itself. And I think that's important, is you don't have to dive right into joining a group and sharing everything. You wait until you feel safe and secure that the people there in that space can hold your story appropriately in the way you need it to be, which may not be the way I need it to be, Rachel needs it to be. To get really clear on what you need back when you share that story. And to be willing to ask for it or state it ahead of time. I don't need comments. I don't need you to tell me X, Y, Z. If I hear this is actually really triggering, so please don't respond with that.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying too is really important. Like, how do you know if a space is going to be safe for your stuff? Like, honestly, I got to create some kind of training or something for coaches to make their shit trauma informed or whatever, because it's really hard. Like, it's hard to know. I mean, I don't, like, if I'm browsing people's offers, like, I rarely see anyone talk about being trauma informed. But on every single one of my sales pages, I put things like, this is an environment that will encourage your no, that will celebrate you passing on anything that doesn't feel doable for you. In a lot of the healing or self-development industry, there's like this pressure, like you're supposed to do everything. And like, if you're not doing this soul retrieval collective group, whatever, then like something's wrong with you. And you're like, oh my God, like stop forcing my transformation. So if you get a feeling of like force from whoever the guide or the teacher is, I would trust your gut and be like, nah. With trauma, you really want somebody who's consensual, who's allowing, who makes space for your no, who celebrates your needs, and who's very, very sensitive to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know we've gotten a bunch of questions and comments coming. Are you able to see that on your end, Rachel?
I see them pop up, but then I can't like continue reading them.
Okay. So let me see what came in first. Okay, so Elizabeth asked, tips on where to start when even your story feels so intense. I made the choice to do it out of public with many. So we did touch on that in the course too. So where to start, where to begin. Like the story is so big and so momentous and so huge that finding that starting point can be difficult.
I mean, I think part of the question in terms of where to start, the answer is always your intuition already knows where to start. And sometimes where to start is to stop. Sometimes where to start is in your body, not in your story, not in telling your story. Sometimes where to start is with the easiest thing to talk about, not the hardest, right? Like, let me tell the story of this microaggression as opposed to this full-on abuse. Or maybe where to start is just by talking about your feelings, but not sharing the story. Or maybe where to start is asking for support and saying, I can't tell anyone what happened, but I need you to believe me that it was fucking hell. And I need support. You know, so what is your intuitive and deepest instinctual desire? Start there. But we can have tendencies to want to start in the place of like the biggest emergency. And I would just be gentle with yourself. You know, when I work with people in person, one-on-one, let's say they've got like, you know, they're coming for sexual trauma. I do touch work with people. I mean, it's fully clothed, but like I would never go straight to their hips. I would start on their wrist. Like you start on the periphery because everything's connected. But if you can start at the gentler entryway, you're less likely to like set off the bomb. And you deserve to not have your bombs going off. You don't, until you have the capacity to dance in the landmine. Be gentle with yourself.
Yeah, and I think when we've been used to living in a state of emergency, it's really hard for us not to think of that as the way it has to be. Like if the way we've been living is that, then the way through the story also feels like it has to be that. I've got a writing resource that I've been working on that actually uses the analogy or the metaphor of the labyrinth, right? You don't go to a labyrinth and hop to the middle. Like it's actually really the circuitous route of going in and going out again and going back in and going around. And it takes a while to get to the center. But you wouldn't get the beauty and the benefit of the labyrinth if you just hopped over all the rows of stones and went right down the middle. That's not the point. And I think that has a lot to add to the writing of a story like this.
Yeah, I love how you said that too. You go in and then you go out again. You know, that's another thing that trauma resolution practitioners will do. It's like you go into the intensity and then you go into the beauty or the ease or the stability or the neutrality. And then you go back into difficulty and then you go into easy. And that's how we build our capacity. You don't build your capacity, for example, for running by running a marathon on day 2 of being back at the gym. Like that's just stupid. You build your you build your capacity by slowly increasing your distances and having breaks, taking days off, doing shorter runs and then longer run and then a shorter run and then a longer run. That's the way we build capacity.
Yeah, that's a brilliant metaphor as well. Alex said, it gets to the point that I can't sit still knowing I haven't been writing my story. Oh, how I can relate to that. Every moment feels precious and the only choice I have is to throw myself onto the page.
Great.
So yeah, when you're in a place where the imperative is the telling, and you feel like you have a window and an opening, absolutely dive in. Pay attention to your body, pay attention to what feels safe and sustainable, back up when you need to. But if that moment is there and ready, then take it. Make sure you have the support you need and go.
Yes.
That's my thought on that.
I agree.
Renee says, I completely checked out for the whole week when it first gained momentum. I did some of Jeanette's writing prompts and a lot of things came up and I'm getting support with a coach now. A bit afraid to dive back into writing, but Rachel's suggestions are really helpful.
Awesome. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And I just want to say too, like, she's so not alone. Like, I know so many people were checked out for like that whole week. It was just way too much. So.
And so here's the thing though, and I think a lot of people felt guilty for checking out, that they had a responsibility or an obligation to bear witness to the entirety of the experience and to everyone's experience. And in the course too, Rachel, you talked about being able to opt out. And that if you're a person who has experienced trauma, your sense of boundaries and enmeshment is probably not as clear as it should be.
Right.
Because at some point you weren't given the option of opting out.
Yeah. No, that's so great. And I take that. I just said that's so stupid, but what I didn't mean that in like a name calling kind of way, but like in a way of, we are in a time where we have more capacity to hear and see so many more people's stories than ever before. And we are not designed for this much input. And our autonomic nervous system is responding accordingly. So that checking out is your physiological response. It's automatic. You didn't make a conscious decision. So yeah, like I think that's a beautiful, wonderful, totally healthy, life-preserving mechanism that's happening there when you check out.
Absolutely. And to honor that and actually celebrate that you had the wisdom and the knowing to take yourself out of what was not healthy and sustainable for you.
Yeah. And also, you know, there's this idea of like compassion fatigue or your empathy well. When your empathy well is empty, because maybe you're struggling or you're going through it yourself, you have nothing to give. And it's like driving a car with no gas. What happens? The car breaks down. Not only breaks down, but you could like destroy the car. So empathy well, like, is it full? If it's full, then show up and feel free to take things in. If it's empty, don't injure yourself. It's not worth it.
Absolutely. We're running a bit behind where these comments came in, so I'm not sure when this came in, but Alex says, how does the act of writing not re-traumatize me? So that's definitely a big question. And I think that really comes back to the preparation and the relationship to self and body that allows you to respond before you get to the state of emergency.
Yeah. Also, when I hear Alex asking that question, when I hear you asking that question, Alex, what that does for my spidey senses is like, it just makes a little, not alarm, but a little like bell go off that might be like, you know, if your answer or if your question is, how does this not traumatize me? It might be a really nice self-compassionate thing to do, to just not write right now. Like to try a different entryway into what you're doing, into your healing. Like there are times for writing and there are times for not writing. So be gentle with yourself on that.
Absolutely.
Like I can give a different example. You know, my earliest sexual trauma happened in a group. And I'm a very sexual person. You know, I've unshamed that in myself. I'm very sexual. I'm very open. I love sensuality. I love connecting with other people. And I would ask that question, how does group sex not traumatize me? You know, well, so it's sort of like, cool, then it might just not be for you right now. Like you just might not need to put yourself through that. So.
And then I think there's other ways. So even if you feel this compelling need and you want to write and you want to tell your story, one, the support you need. Don't do it in a vacuum. Don't try to do it in your own. Maybe don't even try to do it with just an online group.
Yeah.
Find a coach, find a therapist, find a program or a form of therapy that actually helps you through this, and do it with guidance. Do it with one-on-one support if you're able.
Yeah.
Find a friend who also wants to write, who you know is deeply supportive and can hold you through this because they're not in their own state of emergency. Like, don't actually try to do it. It's this vacuum, this standalone. That's not the way to do it. Make sure you have the support you need. In the course, Rachel talks about one of my favorite metaphors that I use in all of life now is to create the wide base of support. So imagine a mountain, and the goal being the peak of that mountain. You don't want to be narrow tippy mountain. You don't want to be the leaning tower of Pisa. You want to have a wide base of support. So what has to be underneath the writing of this story in order for it to be safe and sustainable?
Yeah, definitely.
And then to respond to your own. If you may get re-triggered, re-traumatized. It actually may happen. So how do you recognize that before it gets to the point where you have to do a whole lot of undoing?
Well, and also how do we unshame if we get to that point of like, oh, you know, I didn't, you know, because it's okay. Like I said, like I got triggered reading my book. I wasn't expecting that. Okay, but it's okay. Because again, the resources that we cultivate for before writing are the same ones that we can use if we've been triggered and, you know, we're already in deep. So one of the lessons we do in the course is around creating your safety resources, like your emergency list. Your list of things that keep you safe. And we go through the process of how to really identify those things. So that's definitely recommended.
Absolutely. I'm trying to scroll through these, see if I missed. Jessica, I will post the information on the 30-day Wild Heart writing prompts. And then also I shared earlier mine and Rachel's writing through the hard stuff. So the program we created is a program with 10 lessons, 5 weeks. It's called Writing Through the Hard Stuff. And each week has a lesson and a guidebook and a workbook and a video to take you through the questions that Rachel and I have been asked most often through this process by people who are writing in these spaces. I'll make sure to put both of those links in the comments.
The other thing I'll say too, just mentioning back to what you were talking about, like having people to work with. You know, I have groups. I have something called the Grown Goddess Academy. The next one of that's not launching till the spring, and I also have one called the Sex After Trauma Sisterhood. But in both of these groups, you know, the main show isn't necessarily writing, but there's journal prompts. There's sharing what we've written. There are, you know, poetic entry points into the process. So you can check out my groups. The next one will be live through my book Kickstarter, which goes live on Black Friday. So you just have to hold tight. We can link to that too, but it's not available yet. But you can follow me and you'll find it. But yeah, even groups of any kind, in person or online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so we'll make sure we add both my resources and Rachel's resources to the comments in the video. Or you can even go in and do that now if you want to add yours, Rachel.
I definitely don't know how to do that right now on this.
I think you can just go to the live video and put it in the comments. And then
but
can put it up on
noises. I'm just going to wait.
Okay. All right, check back, everyone. That's the end there. And I think something that you said a minute ago made me think too. It depends on what you need to write. If you need to write, pour it out of you, the advice that Rachel and I would probably give you is very different than if you're sitting down and you want to write a blog post or an article to submit somewhere else or a book of your own or an essay that's going to go in something. Like, because the amount of exposure and the amount of feedback you're going to get are different. So the support you would need around that changes. And that's one thing to think about as well. I feel like. Let's see. I'm still scrolling through the comments.
I found it. I'm at the comments now. I'm going to leave my stuff.
Okay, good. So Elizabeth also asked, what is one question to start with when it feels like a tsunami? So going back again to the starting point of when you're in that emergency, when you're in that place where it's all just coming at you. Do you have suggestions of a way to crystallize through that to like one small space?
You know, I think that we answered that question.
We may have.
I think you just, I don't want to repeat myself. I think we got it. Yeah.
I'm scrolling back, making sure I didn't miss them. I need a bigger screen so I can see them all at once.
Yes.
And yeah, Alex asked if she could PM her blog address for some feedback. Absolutely. Rachel, let me post this. This is Rachel's link to her Grown Goddess Academy.
No, those are for videos. So there's 8 videos in there. And I even have Trauma 101, Sex After Trauma, Sensuality, When It Scares You Silly, all kinds of good stuff in there. Boundaries.
Yeah, that's an excellent, amazing resource. So definitely go to Rachel's website and sign up for that one for sure.
And then you get on my mailing list and you'll get all my announcements and all that jazz.
Yeah, Rachel sends out some good stuff. And she's the queen of live videos. So if you're not following Rachel, go follow Rachel, watch her live videos. She's way smoother than I am.
No.
You totally are. I have live video envy with you, Rachel. It's true.
That's hilarious. Well, I think that you're amazing. So there we go.
Well, thank you.
Are we feeling complete, or maybe one final question to close things out?
I think, I feel like we're pretty good. I will go into the comments and add all the links that we haven't gotten, or make sure those are there, Jessica. Don't worry. I will be right there as soon as we close this off. The link for mine and Rachel's joint program is bit.ly/writing through hard stuff. So that's in the comments already, but I'll add it again. Rachel, you add your paid programs as well after we get off. I will add the link to the 30 questions writing prompts because that starts again on November 15th. Nice. And Rachel and I will both have Kickstarters crowdfunding for our books coming soon. So keep an eye out for that as well. We'll continue to, at least I'll come back to the comments again. So if you're watching this in replay and you have comments about anything we talked about or questions that you'd like us to answer, please post them there. We can connect to other resources that Rachel and I have maybe written or created already, but definitely want to be of service in this space.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for being with us. Thanks for commenting and engaging. Thank you for having me, Jeanette.
Yeah. Thank you.
Love y'all.
So much love. Bye.
Bye.